Atheist Nomads, episode 391, Back to the Cringe.
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin, and it's just going to be me this week. And I held off on recording until Wednesday. I normally try to get recording done at least by Tuesday, so that I have at least a full day to do editing before... Well, by full day, I mean... when I say full day, I mean, you know, after getting done with work and dinner and getting Kylie to bed. So when I put it off till Wednesday, then, yeah, this is going to be basically a live to tape with the auto processing, hopefully. Might do a little bit of light editing, but not a whole lot because, yeah, it's 8 o'clock and I do want to get this out tonight and have to work tomorrow. But the reason why for holding off was, 2 weeks ago, we started recording and knew there was that risk of violence and wanted to hold off on doing all of it just in case that all went really south, and then had to do quite a bit on that. But knew there was a risk of that this time around, so held off both because of that and also getting my second COVID shot. The side effects hit me way harder this time. Yesterday I had muscle cramps and joint cramps when I'd move around, and pretty bad headache and nausea, and yeah. And also decent amount of fatigue that hit Monday night shortly after the shot, and then also, in the evening yesterday. So putting that off with getting that second round of the shot. And they have opened up shots here locally to teachers and law enforcement, firefighters, and the like. And here pretty soon we'll be opening up to people over 65. So again, remember, when it's your turn, go get your shot. Wait your turn. Don't question why it's your turn. When it's your turn, get your fucking shot. And don't forget to wear your mask, even if you've gotten your shot. Like, at this point, I'm probably at 75% protection. They're finding 50% protection after the first dose, 95% a week after the second dose. So I'm 2 days after the second dose. So I'm probably at a good 75%. Yep, still need to wear a mask until everybody's got the shots. But let's move on from there. I did watch the inauguration. I was working and helping with taking care of Kylie, and when it went to Garth Brooks doing Amazing Grace, it was just like, okay, yeah, I'm done. But it was really nice to see the old school, getting back to that normal where there's optimism and hope and somebody who's decent, and then that cringy bits with this priest that went on and on and on and on, where even the people in attendance didn't seem to be able to tell if that was a prayer or not. Closing their eyes for a while and then opening them back up on camera. Oh, that was funny. And, some of Biden's speeches, like his victory speech and then the inauguration speech. Yeah. 95, maybe even 99% awesome. And then there's that cringe. And there was this bit of optimism that hit me with, we're back to news being cringy, not outrage-inducing. Like, that was when this podcast started. Yeah, there was that kind of fake rage on some of the stuff, but that got tiresome as we were, making progress on things. And a lot of this stuff is just kind of, yeah, it's kind of makes you cringe. I do have a fear that Biden will be using religion as a basis for trying to unify the country. And I really hope that's not what's going to happen. But if so, then yeah, I guess we're just going to have to grin and bear it while he actually lets scientists do their jobs and actually tries to do decent policy and tries to do things right and does a bunch of bullshit religious-y speeches. We'll see how that all goes, and I do have an interview lined up for 2 episodes from now. Hopefully that all goes through with a professional secular activist on what's going on now. The Democrats are in control of the Senate and House, and we've got Biden as president. So we will get more to that later, and I do have more of a rant than a Dustin off the degree. And then we've got some insurrection news, and then we'll be getting to some news that feels old school normal, which for those of you that have been listening since, before Trump was president, you will recognize this feels being like we're finally starting to get back to some kind of normal. And we're already starting to get there, and that's awesome. So for this rant, tech and free speech, I've been seeing a fair amount of stuff lately on the way that Facebook, Twitter, and other tech companies, to a lesser extent YouTube, but yeah, the tech companies, the way they have been censoring free speech. That is actually not possible. And the reason for that, those are businesses, not governments. Free speech in the First Amendment is a right to not have the government stop you from saying things or force you to say things, not companies. And censorship, by definition, is when governments are suppressing free speech. So social media companies shutting down accounts, that is not censorship, and that is not a free speech issue. Where this does bring up a point, because like Parler is one that's an interesting one. They had, and we do have another news story about them. They got kicked out of the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, and then Amazon Web Services booted them. And they made the claim that, well, then they just can't do business. And there are some reasonable bits there with the app stores on smartphones, two companies controlling almost every single smartphone out there. Like we're talking 99.99999% of all smartphones are controlled by two companies, either Google or Apple. And Amazon Web Services hosts something like 60% of the internet, at least in the US, possibly even the entire world. Now, with AWS, there's also the added thing of they have a lot of tools that make it easier, like the managed database hosting. You know, the back end of every kind of complex dynamic loading website is a database where all the actual information is stored and then gets pulled up from. And if you've got a database that you've loaded into Amazon's and they kick you out, that's not necessarily going to be just straight plug and play into something you can set up on a different hosting provider. But despite saying that, Amazon only hosts something like 60% of all of the US internet. There's Google, which probably, if they aren't going to let them in the Play Store, wouldn't let them on their servers. There's also DigitalOcean, there's Linode, and a lot of other hosting companies. There is also co-location, where you load up servers and send them off to be put in a rack somewhere, or even just renting office space and getting the lines in and getting that set up. Like, there are ways to do this without relying on Amazon's infrastructure. So to claim that Amazon saying you can't host on their stuff means you can't be on the internet, that's not true. But, and with the mobile stuff, just because you can't be in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store doesn't mean you can't be on the home screens of people's phones. There's progressive web apps that every website should be programmed to be able to do that allows you to just save it onto the home screen, and it works almost as well as a native app. Usually just you don't get the notifications. All right, set up the notifications to go through email. Then you got that covered. Like, this is seriously something that if they think all of that makes it so they can't function, they shouldn't be running something like this if they can't figure out how to get by without the easy solutions. But at the same time, it also brings up some pretty good questions as to Facebook has billions of users around the world. A surprising number of mainstream news articles includes tweets. Twitter is where much of the national political conversation happens. And so, yeah, to be denied from that, you're not a part of that conversation. There are reasonable concerns that these companies have gotten into large enough positions to need to actually fall under free speech and censorship rules. That means is these businesses need way more regulation. And I'm sure the right-wing fanatics don't want businesses to get a bunch more regulation, but I'm sure they do want these businesses to get more regulation. And while I do think that regulation is needed, that we need tougher privacy rules, that we need more clear rules about at what point do the Section 230 protections actually apply, where you are doing moderation and basically you're following the bookstore model where people are just posting stuff. At what point with an algorithm shaping what people get showed, is it that it's other people posting it, or is it that you're showing it to people? Is that algorithm bringing in an editorial piece? These are things that do need to be debated and worked on and regulated. There are legitimate arguments for Twitter being a place that should have First Amendment protections. There are also really good arguments for it to not be. And we need more government regulation on these. And there are also some arguments against that happening. One area of concern that comes to mind for me is if the Biden administration gets a Democratic House and Senate to pass some new regulations that are sufficiently broad and vague that will then allow a federal administrative agency to create the regulations to actually implement the law, the proper way of handling lawmaking, then there's a chance that let's say the next president is Mike Pence, and he takes advantage of that with some regulation about saying that these covered entities must have moderation principles to make sure that obscene, violent, or hateful content isn't there. And then a Pence administration claims that hostility towards religion, which is a phrase from a Supreme Court ruling, that hostility towards religion fits into that category of hateful content. We do need to hope for things to get better, but we should always be thinking in the back of our minds, with every positive, necessary change, how can that be abused to harm us or other people that we care about? All right, in insurrection news, it is worth noting that one of the reasons why I made sure that I was able to watch the inauguration live was if there was another insurrection attempt, I wanted to be able to see it while it was happening live. Parler or Parlay is back partially. It's reachable now, but only with a message from its chief executive saying that they're working to restore functionality. And they are doing that on a server owned by DDoS Guard, which is controlled by 2 Russians. So that's not a great sign that Parler is working on getting back on Russian servers. DDoS Guard works to protect companies from DDoS attacks, and apparently has a focus on helping racist, far-right, and conspiracy sites, such as 8kun, as well as Russian government sites, protecting them from DDoS attacks. And so we will see if a site popular with people who claim to be patriots is going to be back solely through the help and support of the Russians. And if so, that will only further make it clear that anybody who claims to be a patriot is not one. Several Proud Boys, Nick Oakes, for example, as well as Ali Alexander, Enrique Tarrio, Jim Hoft, and several others, have all been arrested for their part in the insurrection in the U.S. Capitol, and have all been raising funds for their legal defense on the fundraising site Give, Send, Go, which is an explicitly Christian fundraising site designed to help people fund missionaries. What we've seen in the last year is that it's being used to fund far-right terrorists. Actually, I'm just going to say far-right terrorists. Proud Boys, insurrectionists, that fucking kid who shot people in Minnesota. This site is bad, it is dangerous, and it goes to further show that a lot of modern Christianity is really just far right. Not conservative Christianity, it's just far right politically. And that on the right, there is no line between religion and politics. However, Give, Send, Go has gotten some flack over this. Including PayPal cutting their ties. Yep, before the coup, you could make your Give, Send, Go donation through PayPal. And now you can't, because PayPal doesn't want to be used to support terrorists. And again, anybody who says that that companies cutting ties with these right-wing organizations are engaged in viewpoint discrimination, no. They just don't want to be funding or helping promote terrorism. Literally, this is a concern about terrorism. nobody would have had, at least in the US, nobody would have had any issues with any of these companies. Actually, let me phrase that. Nobody had any issue when these companies were cutting ties with what turned out to be ISIS or before that Al-Qaeda operatives. But everybody has an issue. But some people are raising a real stink when they're cutting ties with American right-wing terrorists. Fortunately, we have seen a lot of news sites. We're talking CNN, USA Today, the New York Times, like a wide swath of mainstream news. And also the Religion News Service, clearly and directly and explicitly connecting the insurrection with religion. This is people who are clearly, like, it's not hard to find those links. You know, the white flag that was being flown above the masses with the ichthys, the Jesus fish. It said, "Proud American Christian." There's the prayers that happened in the Capitol during the insurrection, the shouting of the religious shouts and chants. Like, there is no reasonable way to look at it as just a group of right-wing extremists and ignore the Christian element in it, because there was strong Christian overtones throughout the entire thing. And yeah, I'm not going to say that everybody involved was Christian. I would be surprised if there weren't a few atheists in that group. But by and large, it was Christians. And while you can't say that everybody in that group was Christian, you can definitely say that by and large, the vast majority were. And you could, and again, as I've said, there's no meaningful distinction between far right-wing politics and far right-wing Christianity in the US. But you could just as easily call these people as Christian terrorists as any other kind of terrorist. You know, that insurrection was very much in an attempt to do God's work, to overturn the election. Now, while the mainstream news is identifying, you know, the crosses and prayers and overt religion being expressed during the insurrection, there are some pastors who are claiming that no, that wasn't Christians. No way could that have been Christians. For example, Pastor Robert Jeffress, megachurch pastor from Texas and close friend and defender of Donald Trump, is claiming that nope, that wasn't Christians. Real Christians had nothing to do with it. It was actually Satan. Here's what he said.
Pete, we've got to acknowledge that what happened Wednesday at the Capitol was not only a crime, it was a sin against God. The people who stormed that Capitol, the people who killed that police officer were not a part of the kingdom of God, as some people claimed. They were a part of the kingdom of Satan. But at the same time, we're denouncing violence. We also have to acknowledge the right of people to peacefully express ideas that we disagree with.
Okay, so you have to recognize their right to do that. Oh wait, but no, but you have to acknowledge their right to have the rally and the march and everything right up until the violence. Obviously, they had the right to do everything until they started doing that. And they were good Christians until they got violent. Is that his point? Is that what he's trying to say? You know, he's saying that people who were literally carrying the cross into battle, you know, they weren't of the kingdom of God, they were of Satan. Seriously? I know he's got to say that. And while it's really easy to get really upset with that, I know a lot of us would also like it if we saw more Muslim clerics saying that, you know, condemning Islamic terrorists. Now, granted, if it was a Muslim cleric talking about Islamic terrorists, we would also get upset if that cleric was saying, oh no, these aren't true Muslims, they are of Satan. That would also be aggravating because clearly they're doing it in the name of Islam. And if they're doing it in the name of Islam, then you need to be condemning them on the grounds of them being bad Muslims. That's what all of us in the West want from, you know, moderate Muslim clerics. Jeffress, of course, is not a moderate Christian cleric. He is never going to say that right-wing terrorists, he's never going to acknowledge that right-wing terrorists are Christian and condemn them for doing Christianity wrong. He is going to just say they aren't Christian, they aren't of God, because he doesn't want to be connected with that. He wants to be connected with everything right up until they literally smash the doors open and start killing people. QAnon was really one of the groups I was waiting to see what was going to happen. And of course, reporters were watching Telegram, where a bunch of them went after getting kicked off of Twitter and Facebook. And what they have found is in a lot of these QAnon groups on Telegram, people being very disillusioned. The prophecies of Q, the Q drops, were all about how Donald Trump was the chosen one, the savior who was going to bring about a military coup and bring the storm that would rid the world of Hollywood and political elites who are raping and murdering children. They would stop this mass raping and killing of children that nobody else knows is happening. Specifically satanic, of course. Yes. The satanic pedophilia ring who is raping and killing and eating children. And that they'll all be exposed and rounded up and executed probably publicly. And so, of course, QAnon was a big part in the insurrection because there was a lot of people who were, they were so invested in this message that the chance of Trump couldn't lose. If he did, their whole message, their whole movement would have no meaning. And so they had to fight to bring about, to overturn the election and get martial law so that Trump could use the military to fully take over the country and bring the storm. And then Biden was inaugurated. They were holding out hope until, the clock struck noon Eastern time for Trump to declare martial law, and it didn't happen, and they were devastated. Some are acknowledging that they were duped. This was all a bunch of lies, and they need to get out of their delusion and move on with their lives. Others are pledging to continue the so-called good fight, despite no clear way that what they're fighting for could happen. And some are even twisting it to, no, Biden is the chosen one who will bring the storm. It'll be interesting to see over the next few months what happens with this. I suspect, much like the Adventist Great Disappointment, that the QAnon Great Disappointment will result in 90% ditching the movement and trying to get back into their old lives and recovering the relationships they destroyed and trying to become more normal again. And 10% will try to get to just less extreme crazy conspiracies, and a small fringe will try to figure out how to spiritualize this and double down. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this goes. One interesting exchange that's here in this CNN article: we are promised arrest, exposures, military regime, classified documents. Where is it? Somebody else wrote, I'm scared, feeling sick in my stomach, but I'm holding the line still. Another one wrote, well, babies are still being raped and eaten. Any fucking minute now, God. And another wrote, Biden is our president. It's time to get off our devices and get back to reality. If something happens, then something happens. But for now, I'm logging out of all social media. It's been fun, guys, but it's unfortunately over. Yeah, it's over. That's so sweet that it's over. And now we have what feels like wonderfully normal news. Mere hours before Biden was inaugurated president, he went to morning mass at the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle in Washington, the Catholic Cathedral in Washington, D.C. It's no secret that Joe Biden is a lifelong devout Catholic, so the fact that he would go to mass prior to his inauguration makes perfect sense. He invited to go with him the Democratic and Republican leaders of both houses of Congress. So Mitch McConnell, a Baptist, Chuck Schumer, a Jew, Nancy Pelosi, a Catholic, and Kevin McCarthy, a Baptist, all went to the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle with Joe Biden for Mass. Now, I don't have any rage about that. This was a symbolic gesture for the beginning of a path forward and bringing national healing and political unity and starting out on the right foot. And it was kind of the sweet bit of McCarthy and McConnell skipping Trump's going away parade to go to mass with Biden. But it really makes me cringe too, because, oh my God, they're going to mass. Joe Biden's trying to bring unity by dragging a Jew and some Baptists to mass. That is seriously cringeworthy. That seems horribly tone deaf. It's a little disgusting. I've been to Catholic masses. where they invite everybody up. And at least the first one I went to, the priest made it very clear that if you are a baptized Christian, you can come and have the Eucharist. You can take part in Mass. And if you are not a baptized Christian, or if you are an apostate, then you would be bringing a curse upon your soul if you come forward and take the body and blood of Christ. So that would have created a scenario where, Pelosi, a devout Catholic, she'd be good to go up. McConnell and McCarthy, both Baptists. They're baptized Christians. They could go take part. Schumer is Jewish. He can't. Like, he was brought into a situation where to fully take part, to at least two of the people present, it would have been viewed as him taking a curse upon his soul. So he would have been a second-class participant. Actually, heck, the Baptists would have been the second-class participants at a Mass. Schumer would have just been a third-class participant. Like, that's really, it makes me cringe. But it also brought me joy that this is the kind of stuff we get to get mad about now. I like getting mad at stuff like this. This is fun. It's inconsequential. It's symbolic. It's not human rights abuses and destroying the lives of millions. House Majority Whip, so that'd be the third highest ranking Democrat in the House, James Clyburn of South Carolina, has plans to introduce legislation to make Lift Every Voice and Sing, which has long been a popular song in the Black community, the official United States national hymn. His tweet about it was, quote, "To make Lift Every Voice and Sing a national hymn would be an act of bringing the country together. The gesture itself would be an act of healing. Everybody can identify with that song." My fucking God. Ugh. I get what he's trying to do. I get that he's trying to use it as a opportunity for racial unification. But if we try to unify the country around Christianity, that might work for the 2/3 of the country that's Christian. It's not going to work for everybody else. I don't particularly have any issue with the song Lift Every Voice and Sing. I do seriously have an issue with the idea of the United States of America having a national hymn. We've had an unofficial national hymn since the Civil War. Unofficial. Let it stay unofficial. We don't need it on the books. We don't need a hymn. Yeah, and if you look at the stats, it's more accurate to say the U.S. is a white nation than a Christian nation. But to call it either is a disgusting and horrible bastardization of what our country should be. And if you're wanting to unify the country and you're wanting to heal wounds of division, don't heal some while opening up bigger ones. Included in the $2.3 trillion coronavirus relief and omnibus budget bill. And yes, that was both the funding of some coronavirus relief and the majority of the United States government for the year. There was tucked into it a 180-day countdown for U.S. intelligence agencies to tell Congress what they know about UFOs. Seriously, it was included in a budget bill that the Director of National Intelligence and the U.S. Secretary of Defense have 6 months to provide the Congressional Intelligence and Armed Services Committees with a full unclassified report about all unidentified aerial phenomena. This was part of the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021. Which of course got combined into the omnibus budget bill. And yes, not only do they have to give all the data, but they need to include detailed analysis of all of the UFO data. Everything collected by the Office of Naval Intelligence, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, and the FBI. This is what the Republican-run Senate Intelligence Committee demanded. It's like, seriously here, what are they looking for? Are they wanting to get more info about experimental Russian flights over U.S. airspace? Are they hoping to get information about aliens? Like, seriously, what is it they want here? That's one of those questions that begs so many more questions. Like, okay, is it that they just want all of this information so that they can try to find justification for meaningless waste of time to hold hearings about UFOs? Is that what they were hoping for? Now, granted, of course, they got that pushed through when they were assuming that they would win the Georgia special elections and still have control of the calendar of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Now that a Democrat is the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, I am sure there won't be a whole bunch of UFO hearings. But like, seriously, what do they want to know here? It is absurd. Like, if they're wanting to know, do we have reason to be concerned about the safety and security of American airspace? That's a reasonable question. Ask for an analysis of that. If they're wanting to know if we've been contacted by extraterrestrials, that is a ridiculous question. But just ask the fucking question. Let the agencies compile a report on their findings on extraterrestrials and be done with it. Instead, they're wasting a bunch of money to put a bunch of civil servants into wasting their time pulling a ton of reports of unidentified flying objects. Because every time a flying object is observed that cannot be immediately identified, it gets logged and investigated. Some of them get identified during that investigation. Others don't. Just because something was seen flying and you can't figure out whether it was a bird or a particular plane. And like in some cases, it's unidentified, even though they clearly identified it was a jet. If you can't identify what jet it is, it's still an unidentified flying object. This is fucking bullshit and a waste of time. And again, so wonderfully cringy. But of course, we still have a Supreme Court where Brett Kavanaugh is the fulcrum point. So, just last week, the Supreme Court granted the then outgoing administration's request to put back into place some restrictions on chemical abortion drugs. This was a 6-3 ruling, with the 6 conservatives ruling in favor of the restrictions and the 3 liberals voting against it, that was overturning lower courts who had been blocking the FDA rules requiring an in-person visit with a medical professional to get the medication. Because of the pandemic, courts had reasonably looked at it and said that, yeah, you should be able to do that consultation over the phone because we're in the middle of a pandemic. And now the Supreme Court has decided, well, actually, they took the easy way out. They didn't actually decide that the leniency for the pandemic was justifiable or not. They came down on the side of, a administrative department of the government made rules, and we're going to just defer to the rules of that agency. It's not the place of the courts to second guess the FDA. Let the FDA do its thing. And while it is comforting that they were just appearing to reinforce the legal principles of letting the minutia of rules be determined by administrative agencies, this is a way of them signaling, challenge abortion, their game, and that sucks. And also, we're in the middle of a fucking pandemic, and you really don't need to see a doctor in person for much of anything. Like Lauren has been seeing doctors through the pandemic, and those visits have, I think, all been over the phone, and they've been great. If you need some kind of diagnostic testing, go do the diagnostic testing, and then talk to the doctor on the phone. It works fine. Heck, when I was having my pain issues back in the late spring, I went to doctors in person when I needed physical examination, and then for the follow-up after my 2 weeks on a shit ton of ibuprofen, it was 10 minutes it was 90 seconds on the phone. That was all that was needed. Getting an abortion from pills early in a pregnancy, that's not complicated. Doctors who are experienced in prescribing those medications should be trusted to be able to determine whether or not that patient requires an in-person consultation or if they can just handle it over the phone. Ireland, and I'm sure we've talked about this before years ago, but I was searching through the website and I couldn't find it. They completed their commission of investigation into mother and baby homes and certain related matters. This was created to investigate 14 mother and baby homes and 4 county homes from 1992 to 1998. And after 6 years of digging into this, they found 9,000 deaths. Over those years and in those homes, they found 56,000 people, girls and women from the age of 12 into their 40s, were sent to these 18 institutions, if we want to call them that, where somewhere over 57,000 children were born. 15% of those 57,000 children didn't survive. And prior to 1960, it appears that not only did they take no actions to save the lives of illegitimate children, it appears that they actively reduced their chances of survival. It turns out that was a feature, not a bug. These were places where unmarried women who got pregnant would be sent, often forcibly by their families, to go. The old, proverbial going to your aunt's for a few months, where nuns would oversee them, make sure they don't leave, deliver the baby, and if the baby survives, adopt out the kid. Moms in these homes leaving with their children was not an option. And so it actually kind of makes sense that there would have been some efforts to decrease survival rates if they didn't have enough prospective adopters. But that's just appalling. 15% infant mortality rate? That's terrible. Like getting into, that's like 17 and 1800s mortality rates. That's what you get when you just don't follow any standard of care. And that's horrible. The Taoiseach, the Prime Minister of Ireland, has issued a formal apology on behalf of the Irish government for not stopping this. Some of the women who have survived these homes are furious that the report didn't look at more, and that the Prime Minister apologized before they'd even had a chance to read the full report. This is something that is going to require a lot more work. The Catholic Church has also formally apologized for its role in this, because when you look at it, the Irish government wasn't running these. The Catholic Church was. These were children, and many of those deaths were the mothers themselves dying due to not getting really any standard of care. These were women and children getting murdered by the Catholic Church. That's what this report really found. Thousands of women, pregnant women, were trusted to the church, and the church murdered thousands of them. That's what this really found. Now, if you look around the world, the U.S. is actually doing better than most countries on getting COVID vaccines out there. That is in part due to the fact that the best vaccines and a lot of the best companies are here. So that makes sense that our companies are going to be giving us vaccines. But Israel is seriously putting us to shame, like we talked about a couple weeks ago with them not giving enough vaccines to the Palestinians. Well, one popular ultra-Orthodox rabbi is going against what all of the other rabbis are saying and telling ultra-Orthodox people to not get the vaccine because it will make you gay. Yes, this is somebody in a particular community that has the highest morbidity rate in Israel from the COVID pandemic because of their general refusal to follow social distancing rules and also refusal to follow masking. And now he's telling his thousands of followers, quote, "Any vaccine made using an embryonic substrate, and we have evidence of this, causes opposite tendencies. Vaccines are taken from an embryonic substrate, and they did that here too, so it can cause opposite tendencies. In other words, if you're straight, it will make you gay, and if you're gay, it will make you straight." This is insane, and it is going to get people killed. People are going to die because of this. Also, these vaccines were tested on embryonic stem cells from cell lines from the 70s. Tested on them. They were not made using them. Stem cells, embryonic cells, are not used in the manufacture and were not used in creating the initial creation of it They were used in early testing. For people who have a serious hardcore objection to using embryonic stem cells in research, the fact that they were used in testing can be problematic. But even the Catholic Church is saying, don't worry about it. We need this. This guy is claiming that they were made using an embryonic substrate. That is flat out factually false. But so is the idea that a vaccine could make people gay. And we've got Pakistan's anti-terrorism court back in the news, where they've handed down 3 new death sentences for social media posts that they determined were insulting to the Prophet Muhammad and in violation of the country's blasphemy laws. So post a meme on Facebook and you get the death penalty. A 4th person who went through the terrorism court on blasphemy charges was a college professor who got sentenced to 10 years in prison for a lecture he gave in a classroom. The convicted can still appeal to 2 higher courts and also ask for mercy from the president. But this is also something that, like, these blasphemy laws have their origin in British blasphemy laws, and after the end of colonialism, they kept them. And then with the military dictatorship in the 80s, they strengthened them. And yeah, people are going to get executed for social media posts. All right, well, we've got some feedback. And we have Lauren joining us for this.
Hello.
Since, some of these are about her episode.
Yay!
So first off, we've got Danielle via Patreon about episode 386, The War on Christmas.
Oh, that's not mine. But anyway, oh well.
14 minutes, 17 seconds. Dustin. They warned that Herod is up to no good. And then she said, Jesus, the Fresh Prince of Bethlehem. They started making trouble in my neighborhood.
Oh, God, no. Oh, that meme has just been revived.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Danielle also commented on Patreon about episode 390 which is the hoo-ha episode, with, quote, perfection.
Thank you. Thank you. We worked hard on that one. And by worked hard, I mean I invited a couple girls to join me on a call, and then we winged it. It was great. These pads have wings.
From Barry via email, just enjoyed listening to your latest refreshingly frank episode on hoo-has. I've been catching up on your podcast back catalog since last summer, and had always assumed the hoo-has in the disclaimer were something other than anatomical.
We just learned about this.
Here in the UK, a hoo-ha, or hoo-ha, spelled HOO-HA or HOO-HAH, is commonly, quote, a state or condition of excitement, agitation, or disturbance, end quote, which seemed also to fit with your disclaimer. As a 61-year-old man from a not particularly sheltered background, I was surprised to discover its alternative meaning. I wondered if you were likewise unaware it had another use. Anyway, love your podcast and keep up the good work. Barry.
There was a part of me that kind of knew that it was used in that way, but it never really clicked.
I don't know that I'd really heard it.
Hoo-ha.
Or that it ever really clicked in my head as anything until Lauren recorded the disclaimer years ago.
Yeah.
And so that just ended up being the connotation I had for it. And then, but I'd never had to spell it.
And I have no idea why I decided on hoo-ha.
I don't either.
That was just the namby-pamby way of saying it at the time.
I think you were going for the most...
I was going for the most unoffensive.
Yeah, unoffensive and almost vague.
Yes. So
apparently that worked.
Apparently it worked.
But I wasn't quite sure on the correct spelling, so when I looked it up while working on the show notes, I came across this exact definition in Webster's dictionary and was surprised to find out that it had the examples that Webster's has for it.
Oh, they're so straight out of a 1890s gossip column.
Yeah.
They're hilarious, which is, because the term is that old.
Yeah. And from Kim via email, thanks for the awesome hoo-ha episode. The world needs more conversations like that. Thanks to the ladies for their courage, openness, and fun. And thanks to Dustin for respectfully staying out of the way. Love the show. You are all awesome. Kim.
Thank you. And I know that was tough for Dustin, but we did good.
I only had to edit out one of my interjections.
Which I appreciate. Good times.
Yeah, it was interesting being in the back seat on my podcast.
Yeah. Traditionally, a producer will sometimes interject, or you'll hear them in the background saying something, and the host will repeat it. But yeah, that was a good example of just kind of trying to stay back and stay out of it, and that's hard to do when you're used to being the host.
And stay back and stay out of it while still having headphones on and watching the mixer and making sure everything was working.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You did a good job.
And we have a upgrading patron, Samuel.
Aw, yay.
That wraps it up for this week. So until next time, remember, not all those who wander are lost. Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/atheistnomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads.